Well, let's start out today with a little bit of scenery here at the mountain before the winds of the hurricane come up through the Carolinas. We don't know how much wind we're going to get. The forecast is always a little iffy, but we probably will lose a lot of leaves if we get any significant wind because they're reaching close to their peak. And so I'll give you a little view of what it looks like off of our deck here at our house on Melrose Mountain at almost 3,000 feet of elevation, and we are seeing some pretty colors right now. Well, you can see we're blessed with beautiful colors to look at, and as I've been sitting here studying some 14 pages of John Phillips' notes about chapter 8 alone, I gotta tell you, I finally think I have chapter 8 with all of my ducks in a row. Sorry I couldn't resist. They were on a lake yesterday. So here we go. In chapter 1, we know that Daniel was about 16 years of age, and it was about 605 BC. We know that Daniel lived to be 536 BC. The second chapter is in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar. Now we know that Nebuchadnezzar reigned for quite a long time, 43 years to be exact, from about 605 BC all the way down to 536. So we know that we know that chapter 2 was written someplace around 604 thereabouts. Chapter 3, we know that Nebuchadnezzar is still in reign, but we're not sure the exact year. In chapter 4, we know Nebuchadnezzar was probably still in reign because his name is prominent there. And Daniel is probably someplace in the neighborhood of 43 years of age. And then there's a king that's not brought out in great detail that reigns, or a couple of kings that reign for about 10 years. And then we have Belshazzar, which we know is in chapter 5. And we know that it's not his first year of reign because we see chapter 7 belonging between chapter 4 and 5. If I haven't gotten you thoroughly confused, then your ducks aren't in a row. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. In any case, Belshazzar is in his first year of reign in chapter 7, and yet he's in second or third or fourth or fifth year of reign during chapters 5 and 6. And that's somewhere around 553 to 543. He reigned about 10 years. And now Daniel is quite an old man. He's in his 70s. And he's no longer a big political wig, but has freedom to travel around. And he has a vision in chapter 8. And that's where we are today. Now, another interesting thing is that Daniel wrote in Aramaic in chapters 1 through 7, but he wrote in Hebrews in chapter 8 through 12. Why did he do that? Well, the first 7 chapters have more to do with the world powers, the different empires that Daniel was being given privilege of seeing events coming and going. But in chapters 8 through 12, it deals again back with the Hebrew people. And so he wanted to be sure that they could read his prophecies and understand what he was saying. So here we are in chapter 8. Okay, so in chapter 8, we have 3 visions. We have a ram with 2 horns. We have a male goat that has 1 horn initially, but then later has 4 horns. And we have a little horn that comes out of the 4 horns. So we have 3 visions, but actually we have the transition from 1 horn of the male goat into 4 horns and then into the little horn. If I haven't confused you yet, we'll get there yet. In any case, we have, through the interpretation of Gabriel, the angel which God sends, because Daniel wants to understand some of this, we have some explanation of who these represent. And you may want to go back and watch some of my previous videos about the different kingdoms, the different empires. But Daniel is seeing quite a ways ahead, but not all the way to the second coming of Christ, as he did in chapter 7. In any case, we see the ram with two horns being representative of Medo-Persia, Persia being the larger horn, Media being the smaller horn. And we know that Daniel probably had some idea that Persia, Medo-Persia, was going to overcome Babylon. He lived long enough to see that that was likely the handwriting on the wall. Anything beyond that, Daniel didn't live long enough to have any idea of the rest of this particular prophecy. But we know through the other prophetic writers of the time, and we also know from the history books and biblical writings, that he had it nailed right on the head. So we have the ram with two horns, Medo-Persia. We see that the male goat with one horn hits this ram and destroys it, or weakens it so far that it takes over and has all kinds of power. And we know that it's translated that that's the Grecian empire coming in. So we have Babylon going out, we have Medo-Persia as the ram with two horns, then we have the male goat, which is the Grecian, which is Alexander the Great. And if you read through the different words in chapter 8, you'll see that Alexander the Great had an incredible amount of victory, even at a very young age. But he later died, and four generals took over. So when his one horn, the male goat's one horn, turns into four, it's the four kings that came out of his commanders that took different areas of his conquest. Little horn that comes out of that is likely the king that came out of Syria. Now that gets very confusing because we know that there were 13 kings out of Syria that all used the same name. We can only delineate them by the years of reign and also by the secondary name that was given to them. So from one of Alexander the Great's generals comes 13 of these Antiochus. Antiochus, there were 13 of them, but the one that we're looking at was also called Epiphanes. And Epiphanes really meant madman because of the strange things that he did, vicious things that he did, particularly as it relates to the Jews. And we find the term, the abomination of desolation. This king from Syria goes into Jerusalem and he absolutely defiles the temple. And there he sets up an image of Zeus, and it becomes an abomination of desolation, detestable in God's sight, in other words. And we certainly see this being told through Gabriel to Daniel. However, I want to bring your attention to verse 27, and because of the length of time of these videos, I want to let you read chapter 8. But in verse 27, Daniel is sick, exhausted, and he has no one to explain all of this to him. And that's an interesting verse, because what he has seen is he has seen God allow the decimation of the temple, of the altar, and of the placing of Zeus in there. And it's a challenge directly to the prince of the host, or to God and Jesus himself. And he doesn't understand it, and he's very upset by it, and he's obviously disgusted by it. And I'm sure when he got to heaven, he asked God about it. God told him, I had it all under control, Daniel. Don't worry about it. So with the coming election and all of the things that we see that could happen in America, could happen worldwide, the viruses, the consequences of the viruses, and all of those things, we again see a tapestry from the bottom and not from the top. We see a mess, but God sees a clear picture. And I think if we're going to learn anything from this little horn, which is not the final Antichrist, but is a type for the Antichrist, this king out of Syria, this Antiochus, And we see the fact that he was a madman and he withheld the daily sacrifices. And Daniel said, for how long? And we have a time frame here of 2,300 days. And it's about approximately 7 years. And we have all of these dates and times that fit right into Antiochus' time of reign and the time that he may have had the temple in defilement. But here's what I want you to learn from this today. Daniel saw almost 450 years in advance of his own lifetime. Daniel saw a glimpse of another 500 years after that. So Daniel saw almost 950 years, at least in some part, all the way through the Roman Empire. And if you really want to get technical, he saw all the way to the second coming of Christ, and we don't know how many more years that is, but nevertheless, he saw all the way out to that time. God's in control. And he allows some horrible things to happen, so much so that Daniel, with all of his faith not to bow down to an idol, faith not to worry about going into a lion's den, faith to get him through all of these different empires that he saw come and go, faith to be exiled from his own country and taken away and tried to be mind-bending to become a Babylonian. And yet he held strong to his faith, held strong to the faith in God and the God of gods, the King of kings, the Lord of lords. And so whatever happens in this election, whatever happens in the future of America, whatever happens in the end of our health and in our own lives, don't look at the tapestry from the bottom. Read the Bible. See that God is in control. Although he allows certain horrible things to happen and has down through the history of mankind, he's still in control. And in the end, we win. Because if we've trusted in Jesus Christ as our personal Savior, we know we have an eternal place in heaven with him, and we'll rule and reign with him. And we can count on that because look at all of the prophecies that God has made through the Old Testament in just these few chapters that we've read, and know that he's in control. And that's my thought for the day. If you don't have your ducks in a row, get them in a row. God bless you and have a great day.